You're listening to Following on India with me, Neil Manthorp, in for John Norman this week. As always, cricket writer and historian Jarrod Kimber is alongside me to look back at India's shock 8-wicket defeat to New Zealand in Bengaluru. We'll discuss the reaction to the defeat in India, ask if Rishabh Pant is fit enough to play in this week's second test, and we'll hear Jarrod's interview with former New Zealand captain Jeremy Coney. You're listening to Following on India. Jarrod, so much to talk about. First of all, I don't know. Let's just start with India's selection. Not Rohit Sharma's proudest moment as India captain, presuming that he had the final say on the 11. And he was the first to admit afterwards that he got it badly wrong.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Tom Latham said he would have batted first. So the toss, which is what everyone's obsessing over, I think both captains thought, oh, yeah, it'll be a little bit difficult to start the day, but then, our batters will get through it. Whereas the bigger issue was that lack of that third seamer, right? And I'm not sure India had the perfect seamer in the background for that. Someone like Prashid Krishna, if he was fit, might have been a very interesting bowler on this particular wicket. But I'm not sure they had the ideal thing. But yes, going in with three spinners, quite clearly. I mean, it wasn't just that it was a good wicket for seamers. We've seen that in India before, matters. It was specifically that it was a bad wicket for spinners. I think the spinners averaged something like a combined total of 51 or 52, and the seamers went at 21 or 22. And it was also like run and a half more expensive when you bowled spin. It really just didn't work for spinners the majority of the game. So that was a huge error. But no one knew how the wicket was going to be played because no one had seen the wicket, right? Remember, the day one was called off in part because Hawkeye didn't have enough time to even use their technology to do a mapping of the pitch. Like no one had seen that surface. By the time they did, I think a few people made some mistakes, but India probably made the more egregious one.
There was a very interesting deep dive into how India were bowled out for 46. I subscribed to this really interesting newsletter called Good Areas. And there was a great analysis by some bloke called Jarrod Kimber on how India were bowled out for 46. And there were lots and lots of, I mean, it was really interesting. You pointed to luck, and I think there has to be luck involved when a team gets bowled out for 46. But you also made the point that New Zealand's three seamers covered all areas, good areas, and there was also a couple of days later, I don't know whether you were being serious or not, but I think you probably were. You made the point that Rishabh Pant 6, one of the biggest ever seen in Test cricket, he hit the ball out of the stadium, may have cost India the Test match. Fascinating stuff.
I mean, it was one of those Test matches where things like that kept happening, right? So the 46 all out. The best way I would explain it is, and you and I have both seen a lot of teams bowled out for very cheap amounts over the years. I remember I was at Boxing Day test when Australia struggled, and there was Stuart Broad's spell, and there was the one in South Africa when both teams collapsed back to back in that game. We've seen this a lot. Generally, and people never like to hear this, but generally it's because on a normal day you have 11 play and misses to one edge. And then just every now and again, you have 11 edges and no play and misses, right? And it wasn't quite like that, but there was an element of that, right? Of if every time they hit the ball in the air, India, there seemed to be a hand under it, right? So you have to focus and you have to understand that those things can happen. And when you have a very low total, it usually has an element of everything going right for the opposition. And then the change of ball is another one of India had got themselves back in front of the game. They were favorites, right? They were actual favorite. I think the draw was maybe slightly a favorite, but if you were looking head to head with India and New Zealand, there weren't many bookmakers that had New Zealand as favorites in that game anymore. And the new ball is taken. Sarfaraz played a bit of a weak shot with the new ball that he would probably be a little bit upset on, now, but he had done his job. Rishabh Pant gets down on one knee and basically just hoiks Southee out of the ground. And the ball that they had was swinging a little bit, but they were handling the swing. The one that was handed back to them seemed like twice as much. Like we have the data, we could see how much more it actually seemed. And so suddenly they're on this wicket and they're 400 for 4 thinking, well, maybe we'll get a 180 lead, maybe we'll get a 220 lead, and then we'll get up. And then the lead just evaporated. It was such an incredible thing. And I don't, remember in the Ashes test when Australia were in a position to win that game against England and that ball was changed as well. We don't focus on it as much, matters, but occasionally a ball will go a bit out of shape and someone will replace it, or it'll get lost, or it'll get damaged, and it'll get replaced. And what was happening before stops happening and a whole new thing happens. And so again, it's such a fascinating test match. You've got Tim Southee outscoring the entire Indian team in the first innings, which is my favorite stat of all time. You've got Rachin Ravindra's great innings. You then have this incredible fight back by India all the way up until the fact that Rishabh Pant hits the ball out of the ground, and then it's kind of over.
Fascinating. Just to be clear, so what was the stat again? Rishabh Pant hits the ball out of the ground, so they get a replacement one, which seems twice as much. And India lose, what was it, 6 for 38?
Yeah, I think they lost in the first 6.5 overs with the new ball. They lost 1 wicket for 21 runs and were handling it well. They might still have lost a couple more wickets. But yeah, it was, I think, 6 for 37, 6 for 38 that they lost from the moment that he hit that six. And if you have a look at the Rishabh Pant wicket specifically, Manners, so he's facing Will O'Rourke, who's coming around the wicket, and it's a back of the length ball, and it just seams back in like peak Morne Morkel or Joel Garner at him, and suddenly he's just like, he just knocks it back onto his stumps. And, I was watching KL Rahul, and we all knew KL Rahul was going to be the fall guy for this, and I'm thinking, KL Rahul has been watching 800 runs be scored on this wicket with ease by every batter in the last 2 innings, and he comes out going, guys, this is an incredible. This isn't even a real cricket ball.
What about Sarfaraz Khan, and does he keep his place now? If Shubman Gill is fit, and what can we expect in Pune, do you reckon? We'll speak to Chetan Narula about that as well.
The Sarfaraz Khan one is really interesting because I know he failed when the conditions were really tough. I mean, all of Indian batters did, of course, but he looked particularly bad when the conditions were very tough. And I think this innings on a wicket that was favouring seam probably makes Indian selectors feel a little bit more confident when they take him to Australia, right? And that's the big question of where KL Rahul, they know what KL Rahul can do. They know that he's got probably a low floor, but maybe a medium level ceiling. And with Sarfaraz Khan, they're like, well, maybe the ceiling is massive, right? But the floor might be, non-existent. So if we're listening to Gambhir saying they're going to take risks and everything, kind of makes sense to leave Sarfaraz in the team for the next little while, knowing that KL Rahul can come in as a backup. That's how I would think about it at the moment. But that 100 that KL Rahul played in South Africa is still very much on the minds of the Indian team. I've talked to some people in and around the camp. They mentioned that a lot. So he's got a lot of positivity from the camp.
Okay, just before we get on to Chetan Narula, let's hear from Tom Latham. Now he's a master of understated happiness. Tom Latham, as I mentioned on the Following On podcast, I'm sure he was jumping up and down with excitement and joy and happiness inside, but on the outside, he was more concerned with giving some credit to India's fight back.
From our perspective, we knew India were going to come back. From the wicket point of view, it was probably at its best over those couple of days, or day and a bit to bat. So we certainly knew it was going to be a challenge against India, who obviously have a lot of firepower in that lineup, and they certainly keep challenging us. They keep asking good questions, and obviously to get a lead from the position that they were in was obviously a quality effort. But I think the work we did with the new ball yesterday evening was outstanding. I think Tim Southee, Matt Henry, and Will O'Rourke with that new ball just asked lots of questions, and obviously managed to get the rewards. So I think at that point we certainly knew India were going to be get themselves right back in the game, and certainly just happy we weren't chasing too many more than 100.
That was Black Caps' new captain, Tom Latham, giving credit to India for what was a wonderful fight back. Just a quick word, Jarrod, on how this may have affected India's chances of reaching the World Test Championship final.
Yeah, it's so complicated, as you know, and there's a Bangladesh-South Africa test going on right at the moment, which is, I don't know how many wickets they had fallen at the time we started our recording, but I think I just saw Tristan Stubbs go out before I sat down. So South Africa is the main issue, I think, that India has as a third team that can come up. And so this is a test that most of us had penciled in for them to win. So they have 7 more tests. And by my equations, to be safe, I think they need to win 4. I think they can win 3 and have a draw, but it does depend on how good South Africa are. And as you and I both know, South Africa is about the least consistent side in world cricket because no one can bat and they can all bowl. So they could lose a couple of games that they should, South Africa. And then, of course, you've got literally India is going up against Australia. If Australia managed to win that series 3-0, 4-0, have a bunch of draws, whatever, again, that causes India problems. But those are the three teams. And this is, I would say that I had India pretty much penciled in. I'd say I had it penciled in, but with a sharp pencil, manners, and in a way that like it's very hard to erase. At the moment, I've started to see if I can erase some of India's name just in case.
Yeah, South Africa. I have to say that it's the most flawed international competition ever created in any sport in the history of sporting competition, the World Test Championship. And I mean, if South Africa do make it to the final, it would be largely down to the fact that they're only playing 12 Test matches as opposed to the 20 plus that the big three are playing. Okay, let's look ahead then to Pune and what we can expect there. Chetan Narula is just about to join us. Gone are the days, I suspect, where, I mean, I can still remember when a team would go 1-0 up and then play an extra batsman and try and hang on for the series win. That's just not an option for any team these days, is it? And I mean, how do you think New Zealand will go about it? And I'll get your thoughts on how India might go about it. Does Akashdeep play? I mean, how will they go about things in Pune?
Yeah, there's some issues with New Zealand because I think their second best spinner is going home for the birth of his baby, isn't he? Bracewell is leaving. So I'm a big fan of Bracewell's best delivery. He's stock delivery, maybe not quite as much, but he's a very good cricketer. Obviously, another beast in the field. I think his nickname is the Beast, isn't it? So brilliant in the field and can whack some balls when needed as well. And certainly, if you have Phillips, Bracewell, and Matt Henry and Tim Southey at the end, you've got a lot of six hitting power for a Test match team in that area. But I think they're going to have to bring in another spinner for Pune. I mean, Chetan is going to be more of an expert. The last time I was at Pune, it was actually impossible to hit a delivery of spin, and Steve O'Keefe became the world's greatest bowler. So that was the last time I was there. It's been a while since then, but I would assume that that is a wicket that spins a lot.
Chetan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You're an old friend of the program. First of all, what's the reaction been by and large in India? I mean, 46 is well, we saw how India had been bowled out for nothing before and beat Australia. So look back at Bengaluru and forward to Pune for us.
Well, thanks, Neil. First of all, glad to be back on the show. Always a pleasure. The reaction to 46 was, well, it was, it's social media. Now it's all about memes, isn't it? And with Pakistan doing what Pakistan does, and then India doing this. And then, a throwback to 36 all out in Adelaide with the Australian tour coming up. So basically, you're getting those low scores out of your system before you reach the Australian shows, and then you get ready to beat Australia in Australia. So that's been the reaction, really. The fight back was really positive. Sarfaraz Khan just lighting it up, Virat Kohli amongst the runs. I think that was one of the big positives for me personally. Virat Kohli batting like Virat Kohli does. He wasn't looking like the Virat Kohli of the last few years. He was looking like prime Virat Kohli, and that's good news ahead of the Australian tour. Then, of course, Rishabh Pant and Sarfaraz with that big partnership. So, look, when you're 46 all out, it rarely happens that you're going to turn the match around and win. So the expectations were very realistic since the 46 all out. Having said that, India, as Jarrod has been taking out his calculator time and again, India have shot themselves in the foot regarding the World Test Championship. I still think they'll make it easily. A lot depends on how they do it in Australia and what happens with Sri Lanka in South Africa. If Sri Lanka performs some heroics and win there, then India might be in a bit of bother. But otherwise, India, I think, will still scrape through. Looking ahead to Pune, let me assure Jarrod, first of all, nothing has changed in Pune. Literally nothing has changed. I think, Neil, you were there during the ODI World Cup last year when South Africa were playing there. So you can assure Jarrod, nothing's changed there. As regards the pitch, yeah, I think now you'll see more Indian spin, more Australia type pitches. As in, when I say Australia type, the pitches that were used in the Australian series or when England came around, not the ones in Australia. So India really need to win these two matches. In fact, look, we are one bad session away. When I say we, I mean India. India is one bad session away from the home record that has stood since 2012. One bad session, and you could be staring at a series defeat, because it might be a transitioning New Zealand side, but it's still a very, very good New Zealand side, as they showed in Bengaluru. So one bad session, either in Pune, as Jarrod was saying, against Steve O'Keefe. I mean, if you give them rank turners, Ajaz Patel took 10 wickets the last time he was here. Mitchell Santner has always been a very good spinner. Doug Bracewell obviously is missing out. But again, when you bring the rank turners, anybody can spin them, and the margin of error for the batters just goes higher and higher. So in that sense, I think India are caught in between a rock and a hard place at the moment. So yeah, we're going to see a lot of turn. They need to win both test matches, and also the fact that we are one bad session away from a series defeat.
It's interesting because the Pune test on paper, India should just win. And I think you're right. I think if they do a rank turner, they give New Zealand a sniff that they don't need. But if it's just a normal spinning wicket, I don't know how New Zealand has the ability to handle India on that. But Wankhede is the third test, right? Now, Wankhede, certainly in the IPL, is not a wicket that we associate with lots of spin and everything else. That's an interesting third test venue now, considering that New Zealand have won the first one, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But you do remember Australia coming there in 2005, and Michael Clarke became the greatest spinner of all time. 2004, 2005, something like that. So, I mean, look, a cricket wicket can always be underprepared. Just ask Pakistan. I mean, they converted the national, over-prepared it, and then underprepared it the next week. And then you played four spinners who, look, let's leave Wankhede out for the moment. But I think even when you say that, if they do not prepare a rank turner, I still think New Zealand are a very good side. Just look at how Will Young batted, how Rachin Ravindra batted. I mean, I think the future is very safe for New Zealand. They've been worrying what will happen once Kane Williamson goes, and if he's not in prime form, this and that. Even with Tim Southee's form being up and down, look at O'Rourke or Matt Henry. They're just coming through the ranks. I think Tom Latham is a very, very capable captain. And now that he's full-time captain, he can impress himself really well on how he sees New Zealand cricket shaping, especially in the test format. So even with a normal wicket, I think it's going to be very even, Stevens. And with a rank turner, especially, as you mentioned rightly, Jarrod, the margin of error just goes up, and anything can literally happen. You can see another 2.5-day test with New Zealand leading 2-0, going to Wankhede, and then nobody cares what pitch is in Wankhede, really. So, yeah, I think the one thing I will say is India, I found them pre-match in Bengaluru, I found them in a similar position to Indore when they lost to Australia, because they were looking too far ahead. They were looking ahead to the World Test Championship final, and they were thinking, oh, we'll do that, we'll do this in Ahmedabad in the next test match. I think India have been caught out again. They've been thinking too much about the Border Gavaskar Trophy. They're thinking about resting their pacers, and I think that was one of the key reasons why the third pacer didn't play, because I don't see the three pacers playing in all three test matches. These three are their first choice pacers for the Australian tour, because we don't know what Shami's fitness status is. So even if Shami is fit, you take 5 pacers to Australia, really. So you need your top 4 pacers to be fit and fine, fit and running. So my point is, India were again caught thinking too far ahead. They were not in the moment, and I think they've been brought down to the ground, and they really need to concentrate on just the next session, next hour of play, and just play accordingly.
So Washington Sunder's been added to the squad for the second and third tests.
Yeah.
Is he packing his drinks tray and fluorescent bib, or I mean, how on earth how would they fit him in? And Rishabh Pant, is he going to be fit? Does Sarfraz Khan keep his place?
I'll start with the last one, because KL Rahul is the most hated cricketer in India at the moment. It's been a while it's been a while since then. He can't just seem to do anything right, can he? I mean, if Rishabh is not 100% fit, I don't think they'll risk him, because Rohit Sharma was saying in the post-match presser, still a couple of days for the test match, so we'll know by tomorrow how he's shaping up. But I don't think they would want to risk him going into Australia. If that happens, then KL Rahul keeps his spot, because he's the only one who can keep wickets, or Dhruv Jurel comes in. But I think KL Rahul would keep. and then Sarfaraz gets to play. But otherwise, you have to play Sarfaraz, don't you? You have to. I mean, 150, the way he batted, there's just no excuse to drop him then. But stranger things have happened in Indian cricket. Karun Nair was dropped after scoring 300 runs, wasn't he? So Rishabh Pant and KL Rahul, I answered. Or Sarfaraz Khan, I answered that. What was the third question?
Shubman Gill, I don't know. So many
Yeah.
questions.
Shubman Gill gets fit, he'll walk back into the side at number 3. Watching Virat Kohli at number 3 was just all kinds of weird. So yeah, I think India will be careful. Washington Sundar. The funny bit is he's just scored 150 in a Ranji Trophy game in Delhi. So he's not been brought in for picking wickets, is he? For scoring runs. I think they might play him in place of Kuldeep. I think Kuldeep didn't perform as per expectations. And they might think of another spin all-round version, just prolong that batting. But if you want to prolong that batting, why not go to Akshar Patel, who's been a terrific number 8 or number 9 in these conditions, even against Australia when it was really turning. He played match-winning and match-saving knocks in Kanpur and Delhi. So why not go with Akshar Patel? So I think the Washington Sundar selection is a bit confusing, but let's see what happens.
Okay, Chetan, just before we let you go then, I know that it's just for a bit of fun, but give us your prediction. Jarrod and I was asking Jarrod whether New Zealand, whether any team in Test cricket, given good weather, can remotely consider hanging on. I mean, the game just moves too quickly, doesn't it? There's no way that New Zealand can try and consider hanging on for the victory.
Look, if it doesn't rain or something untoward doesn't happen, like a rank turner, which we've seen in the past, where likes of Clark and Steve O'Keefe have turned the ball square. Unless that happens, or again we see a freak show like we saw in Bengaluru with the weather, no side is good enough. India is the toughest test assignment for a reason. Good weather in Pune and Mumbai, irrespective of the pitches, I think India will be too good for New Zealand. I see this series as 2-1 to India. But having said that, like I mentioned earlier, we're just one session away from losing our home record. So India will have to play out of their skins.
Thanks for your time. Enjoy it. I'm not sure whether you're going to get to Pune again, but
not anytime soon. Not anytime
soon. It's better than Kanpur.
Okay, let's not do for the comparisons, but I would agree. I would agree. Yes.
Chetan, Narula, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the series and enjoy the Border Gavaskar. I'm sure we'll talk to you during that series as well. Indian cricket writer and broadcaster Chetan Narula. Okay, time now to focus on the Black Caps after their magnificent victory, first win since 1988. Earlier on this week, Jarrod spoke with former New Zealand captain Jeremy Coney to reflect on that wonderful achievement.
Jeremy, coming into this series, if I had asked you what the percentage chance of a likely New Zealand win was, what do you think you would have given me?
Slim chance. If I gazed backwards over the past, 1955-56 was the first tour of India. We've only had 2 wins during that period, so very slim chance would be. So I'd be under 5%.
I mean, it's incredible that so quickly that changed. The 46 innings, and then the 400 that followed it. There was a point at which this looked like it was going to be a massive victory for New Zealand, but in the end, they bowled a team out for 46 and it had a 350 run lead, and still, in classic New Zealand style, had to earn the victory.
They did, and it just does show you that, it's still a good Indian side. I think people, might be looking at this and saying, all right, we've found a terrific New Zealand side, or they've unearthed themselves and we didn't anticipate it. It's not that. And that's why I wouldn't get too excited about this. I just think India are still a very, very strong side, and they will be very, very difficult in Pune and also in Wankhede as well. So let's just wait and see. Not get too excited. Keep working hard as if you're a player.
And you know, just from a New Zealand point of view, you said not get too excited, and that makes sense. I mean, it's the first test in the series. We've seen India lose the first test a few times and still storm back into these series again. And Pune might spin a lot more, so that will change the way that New Zealand go about it. But we were talking on I was going to say on the morning of the first day, but I suppose throughout the first day, because we had nothing else to do on the first day, we were talking about Watling and Taylor and Bolt and Wagner and all these players moving on, and Southey has obviously been in conversation quite a bit, and he's let go of the captaincy. All those things considered, even if they got the best of the conditions, it's still a very, very big moment for New Zealand cricket, because I think we were all trying to work out if they were in transition or if they were in maybe had the handbrake on.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. What you're really asking me is, where are New Zealand at relative to their own past? And there's no doubt this side is learning as they go along. Even players like Mitchell, who you would regard now as quite a steady pick and selection in the side, he's only had 25 test matches. So, we aren't the experienced group that we used to be. That's mainly because of the selection policies of someone like Gary Stead, who's the coach as well and selector, who has been quite a conservative selector. And because we don't have huge numbers of players to select for international cricket, then he just keeps believing we've got the best ones we've got. Let's give them chance after chance, and they will come through in the end. And it's kind of a policy that sort of worked for a while, but then you get the aging component coming in, and then you start asking questions about who's coming through. And so, while you mentioned Wagner and Bolt gone, we've found another, I think, that is saying, yes, I have some potential here, and we quite like the look of O'Rourke. So while we celebrate that, let's not get too over the top about it, because there are still things he can be better at. I like the look of young Ben Sears, and I'm a bit disappointed he's been injured with a knee injury and won't be on this tour, because he would have got a game as well. He's faster than O'Rourke, and he swings it slightly out, right arm as well. So he is a player I think they could in tandem in the future would be very useful.
And I wonder, you talked about O'Rourke. Ratcharavindra is the other one. I'm very high on Ratcharavindra. And one of the reasons that I'm so high on him is because of how complete his batting is. There isn't an obvious weakness that myself as an analyst would be able to poke at the moment. And I just feel like he can play the short ball, and he can play the moving ball, and if it's spinning, and he can reverse, or he can use his feet. He just has so many different options. As a former test batter, it does feel like he's got everything he needs to be successful in the test arena.
Technically, yes, he is already at 24, a fine player. And he is an attacking player as well, which New Zealanders don't tend to be. They tend to be defensively based, bat time, can play the shots, but they don't usually use them. A little bit like Kane. Kane, you only see them after a long time at the crease. Then you start saying, oh, he can play that stroke. Didn't realise that. But Ratchin is different than that. We see them come out before he's 20, and he gets on top of the bowling quite quickly. The other thing I think you haven't quite mentioned is his appetite. His appetite for runs. He doesn't just get to 100. I mean, his first century was a 200, wasn't it? Against a weakened South Africa side, you might say. But then here he got to 100 against India, and he wanted to go on as well. And so he got to 130 odd, I think, here. And finally got out, but he was 10th out. And he would have liked to have kept going. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So that's quite a nice skill set to have, the ability to play a wide range of bowling, and at the same time, if you get success, you keep going and you drive yourself on and on. My worry is, as I've said before, is that New Zealand might not be able to hold him quite as long as we might have.
I've got one final question for you. I asked you, before about how you felt and everything, and you gave a very cricket answer, proper former pro. You were talking about, they've got another test to come, and there's lots there. Just from, you are the Gandalf of New Zealand cricket, as everyone is always referring to you as. You've been,
come on.
Yeah, but
I haven't seen that movie right through, but that's okay. I know what you mean.
There's a book as well, I think. I would have thought you would have read the book. But, you've seen a lot of games. Where does this rank as one of the most unlikely victories in a country that's had a lot of incredibly unlikely victories? This has got to be pretty high.
Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be because of the conditions. And then I think, well, hang on a tick, what were the conditions that caused and brought about the game? And they were, in fact, New Zealand-like conditions, weren't they, in the first day? And that was the greatest part towards, I think, creating the victory. We had a good glance in the third innings of the match, what are Asian and what are Indian conditions. And we found that our bowlers still just struggle a bit, and particularly the spinners. We've traditionally selected 2 spinners and 2 seamers in Asia, and we've sometimes had some part-timers to go with the 2 major spinners. New Zealanders selectors have continued to try a concerted spin formula when we go to Asia. And the trouble is that they're not quite capable either of bowling the pace they need to or the number of revolutions they impart on the ball. And so that results in less drift prior to pitching, and it's less turn when it collides with the surface. They also can't get it to drop with an overspin as well. So the things that you want to create as a spinner, they don't quite technically have at their disposal. So we really desperately need, I think, in New Zealand to require a very organised pathway and system to somehow, start our spinners into and get them there and get them in concert with good spin bowlers and coaches and so on, even if they have to go overseas. We've got Rangana Herath at the moment, who seems to be alongside the news. I'm delighted that he's there and working with someone, like Ajaz Patel. But we need something more in New Zealand so that we've got the future spinners coming through. And we need to do that. If we're not, we've got to play a spinner. We can't keep on just the same way as India in the last 5 or 6 years. You'd know more than I would about that. But they've obviously wanted to get faster bowlers so that they can take them to South Africa and New Zealand and to England. And they can be, competitive because they have, and they're fast bowlers now, they've built up some depth. Yes, you need resources, and that's where the difficulty is, of course, in New Zealand and a lot of the lesser, countries that just don't have the money to attract the sorts of things that you want. So that's a bit of a pity, but that's what we need to do. There's no doubt about that, to make us a better all-round side.
That was Jarrod in conversation with former New Zealand captain Jeremy Coney. Jarrod, as you said, Michael Bracewell going home for paternity leave. Jeremy there expressing concerns about New Zealand's spin options. The thing is, if Pune behaves like we expect it to, how good a spinner do you have to be?
Yeah, when they lost to Australia in indoor, I wrote an article saying that if you make your wickets so random, you actually allow for Todd Murphy to come in and steal the test match from you, or Matt Kuhneman to come in and steal a test match. We saw the same with Tom Hartley, right? If your wickets are ragging, then Ashwin and Jadeja are still better than the other guys, but the gap comes down, right? Whereas on a flat wicket, Ashwin and Jadeja might go up to here, but a normal spinner, part-time spinner, might go through the roof, right? So I do believe that you have to be careful with that. And on a flattish wicket that has genuine turn, I just don't know how you beat India, because they probably have the world's 3 best spinners. Chetan was talking about dropping Kuldeep Yadav. He might still be the world's 3rd best spinner. He's played 1 test and they're like, oh, we might need to give him a spell, right? Akshar Patel had a bowling average of minus for a little while there, Manners, and he can't get in the side, right? Like, it's a ridiculous amount. Like, where would Ajaz Patel come into the list of the world's best spinners? He might be 12th or 13th, and then and Glenn Phillips probably a little bit lower again, right? And Ish Sodhi as well. So, if you do a flat wicket that just, and I don't mean a flat wicket, but I mean an even wicket, that has a genuine turn on it, I don't know how you beat India. But if they do a wicket that is really, really hard to bat on, that you allow yourself for Racham Ravindra to play another great innings, or for Conway to play a great innings, or Glenn Phillips to come in and make 60 off 30 balls at one stage because he's bored, right? And something like that can happen, and then you're in trouble. So I just think a nice standard wicket is India's best bet, because I think they're a much better side than everyone else when it comes to that. And on flat wickets, their seamers are usually very good. That's the interesting thing about Indian seamers, is you put them in conditions when the ball does a lot, and they're okay, but they're about the same level as the seamers from the opposition. You put Indian seamers on a flat wicket, and they suddenly look 10 times better than any other seamers you can bring from around the world. So I think that, for me, is the kind of surface I'd be looking for in Pune.
Okay, finally then, just for fun, because you bring a level of analysis which it supersedes the subjective emotion that most of us make these predictions.
Are you calling me
a
a robot?
No, a level of analysis. I'm not saying that you don't also have subjective emotions, but what is your, can New Zealand win, and do you think they will, the series?
I would still say that India has a 70% chance of winning this series. If you think about it, if I put on my most robotic hat, if you think about it from that point of view, there's no way that India doesn't start favourites in the next 2 games. So the only way, there has to be another fluke confluence of events that would have to go in New Zealand's favour. And even when all of those things went in New Zealand's favour, like the really tough pitch to bat on and then a really easy pitch to bat on back to back, there was still a point in which India were favourites in that last test afterwards, right? Like, there was still a point at which they got themselves into a lead and gave themselves a chance to win. So I can't imagine there's ever going to be a situation in the next 2 tests where that happens again. What could happen, though, is a draw, right? There might just be a wicket that doesn't allow for a result. Maybe, maybe some more rain comes in, or there's another issue and everything else. But if you're asking me right now, I would say the most likely result of this series is still a 2-1 India. But haven't New Zealand made it 1,000 times more interesting? I was doing, same as you probably, doing all these previews coming in. And I was like, this is the most pointless preview ever, because there's no other answer that you could give to the question of what the scoreline will be other than 3-0, right? And I was the one who actually came up with a roadmap of exactly how I thought New Zealand could win a test, which is almost exactly what happened. And even I couldn't find a way for them to have a chance of winning a test. So we knew it was going to be 3-0. It was going to be 3-0. It was going to be 3-0. And then New Zealand did this magical thing. I still feel it's going to be 2-1 India. But hey, that's why we play cricket, because we don't know 100%. But it would be one of the greatest moments in Test match cricket if New Zealand somehow win this series.
I can't see a draw between any teams in any conditions with 5 full days. I'm surprised you can. I'm surprised you can.
I mean, I can't, but I also couldn't. I couldn't imagine a team making 550 and getting absolutely smashed in the face. And I couldn't imagine a team getting bowled out for 46 and having a 350 run loss, ending up with a lead and having a chance of winning. I couldn't imagine whatever happened between Bangladesh and South Africa. Just manners. Come on, we're both historians. The last 6 weeks of international cricket has been as crazy as any in the history of the game. You have Bangladesh going to Pakistan and winning 2-0. You have everything that's going on in England, Pakistan, which I still don't actually understand. You have the India Bangladesh game. Then you have New Zealand beating Bangladesh. And then you have West Indies beating England in the Women's World Cup, South Africa beating Australia in the Women's World Cup, and New Zealand winning the Women's World Cup, right? Like, everywhere you look, there's just madness. There was a game the other night. This is so nerdy. Only people like you and me would care about this. There's a game the other night where Nepal had to defend 7 runs in the last over with Andreas Goose for the USA batting. Like it must have been like 1,000 to 1 shot, and they got the tie and then won in the super over. Like, every time I watch a cricket game at the moment, something ridiculous happens.
It's a very, very good time to be alive if you're a cricket fan. It's been brilliant. And a reminder, you can hear ball-by-ball coverage of the second test match between India and New Zealand on talkSPORT 2. Jarrod's part of the team, the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel as well, and on SENZ from 4:30 a.m. on Thursday morning. John will be back alongside Jarrod next week to look back at that test. But for now, this has been another edition of Following on India.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.